Alright, so the idea behind all of this is that I'm going to show you how to take a normal app and turn it into a progressive web app. And there's actually a great site here, developers.google.com. It tells you the basics behind a progressive web app, that it needs to be reliable, it needs to feel like a native app, and it's got all of this. But the good bit is if you scroll up, you can click on PWA checklist. And this essentially gives you a checklist of everything you have to do for Chrome to identify your application as a progressive web app. The reason it even does that identification is because if Chrome does identify you as a progressive web app, for example, it will pop up a little button after you visited the site a few times saying, hey, would you like to add this to the home screen? And if you click yes, they'll get it looking like a normal app. So it's a great idea to try and become a progressive web app wherever you can, because it will boost the number of users that are using whatever you've made by allowing them to use it as a proper app. So what we're going to be using is Netlify, and I've set up this basic to-dos app on Netlify. All I did is I went back to my site, so I clicked create a new site and I linked it into the GitHub repository, which I'll link down in the description in the blog post which is associated with this. But I don't have any post-processing on, I don't have any extra features, I've just got the bog standard app. I did go into the upgrade section, and since I'm making this open source and I'm doing this as a demonstration, I've clicked the button here to turn it into an open source repository which gives you access to the pro features for free, which is really, really cool. The actual app is based on To-Do MVC, which is created by some Google developers and some other developers. The idea behind it being that it's a really, really simple to-do list made entirely in JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this icon here. All I've done to get this is installed the Lighthouse extension for Chrome. You just click here, then you hit Generate Report. And what Lighthouse is doing is it's testing for everything on that checklist I showed you. So it's checking how it responds if it's offline, it's checking the color contrasts, it's checking the features that we're using. And here we go, it's generated a report. As you can see, we've got 25 out of 100, which isn't too great, so that's what we're going to try and fix. You can see we don't have a service worker, so we need to fix that. Our site's not on HTTPS, which Netlify makes really easy, so we'll do that in just a second. And we need our application manifest, so we need to sort that out. And then we've got performance metrics, so for example, critical request chains 9, so we have to make 9 requests before we can actually get a usable app, which isn't very good, so that's something we're trying to fix. So to begin with, HTTPS, you can see we're currently on the netlify.com, but if you go onto the app, you can see that I've also set this up here as todopwa.oliverdunk.com. So if I click on there, you can see privacy error because I've got HSTS. Basically, I'm forcing HTTPS on every subdomain of my website. But luckily, Netlify makes it really easy for us. We just click here on HTTPS, click Let's Encrypt Certificate, click Provision, and give it a second. There we go. We then have HTTPS enabled on the website, and I can just go back here, hit refresh, and there we go. So we've instantly got HTTPS, no configuration needed, so Netlify makes that all really, really easy. We need to look at sorting out our critical request chains. The best way of doing that is to hit Netlify, settings, we scroll down here, go to post-processing, and we can untick disable processing, and as you see, it automatically prettifies our URLs, bundles our CSS, bundles our JavaScript, does all of that at once, so we can then hit save. And we need to re-upload everything. There we go, trigger build, hit OK. And then you can see here it's building, it's preparing the Git reference, and then before deploying it to the CDN, it's doing all of our post-processing. And then if I head back here, it's this one actually, isn't it? So I'll close that one off. Hit refresh, and then hit Lighthouse again, generate report. What it's now doing, of course, is going through doing that same reporting process again, but hopefully now it's going to notice that we've minified some of our JavaScript and we've made the site more optimal, so hopefully it's going to give us a better score, and look at that, it's giving us a 38 out of 100, which is a lot better. The next thing to do is our application manifest and our service worker, so I'll do a little bit of work on that, and then I'll get back to you. So since the last take, there's a few things that I've done that I'd like to talk about. First of all, we've added a few meta tags. We've added the theme color meta tag, which essentially says how the Chrome of the web browser, that's the top bar, and anything that's part of the UI should be styled to fit in with the website. And also this viewport tag, which says how the page should be scaled. This is generally the tag that you're going to want if you're doing any sort of responsive design for mobile. So just copy that straight out and you should be good to go. In terms of the web manifest, that's what we've got on this line here, line 8. It really is as simple as just adding a link to a manifest.json file. The important thing, of course, is what you add inside that file, so let's take a quick look. You need a name and a short name. The name is what will appear in the banner when it's asking you to add it to your home screen, and the short name is the name that you'll commonly see sort of at the top of the page. If you've got the app icon on your home screen and you're looking at the app, that's the name which will appear. You've then got the start URL, which is essentially the web page which should be opened when your app is first opened from the home screen. The interesting thing to note about this is that it's relative to where your manifest.json file is stored and not relative to the root directory of your site. So that's the gotcha which you should probably watch out for. We've also got background color, that's self-explanatory, description, theme color, I think you can understand all of those, and icons. Just a quick pointer, this is something which I didn't do at first. Lighthouse will only mark you as having this if you've got an image above the size of 192 by 192 pixels. So if your icon's going to be smaller, you need to consider getting a bigger icon, which you can then use for this manifest file. Interestingly, some of the specifications recommend manifest.json, some of them recommend manifest.webmanifest. I actually spoke to Addy from Google about this over on Twitter. I'll put a link in the blog. And it turns out there's actually an open issue, which is here. Essentially, people are having problems with the JSON file in their servers, and so they've decided that it would be better if they had a unique extension. The JSON extension still works, and that's what I'm using, but the .webmanifest is being recommended now as the standard file extension, so that's probably something which you should try and use whenever you can. Again, I'll link to this issue if you'd like to read into the problem more and have a look for yourself. I think that's basically the manifest.json file done. If you want any more help, the file which I used, which came in real handy, was this. This is the web app manifest file by Mozilla Developer Network, which is a really great site for anything, really, when you want to look at a spec but you want to understand it without having to read into the small print. It's got this great example manifest, and then it talks you through all the different members of the JSON and what they all do. Alright, so welcome back, and if you're wondering why I'm wearing something different, that's because this is actually day 2 of development. I've been doing some work on the service worker, which I wasn't able to finish last night, and that's now in a state where I can show it to you. So the idea behind the service worker, if you haven't seen it before, is that it's a middleman that sits between your website and the internet. So rather than instantly going to the internet for all of the requests that your website might need, you've got an extra layer of JavaScript there which can do extra optimization, and rather than just sitting on that page, it's actually sat in a sort of intermediate layer, so you're able to manage caches between a number of different tabs which may be open with the same site. And that's what makes it really exciting, because by managing those caches with a simple piece of JavaScript, you're able to do things like having your site work offline. So just to show you what I've got, if I quickly open up Developer Tools by doing Command Alt and I, and then I refresh the page, you can see that it actually finishes really quickly. And the reason is that because, as you see, all of these requests for the index.html, the JavaScript, the CSS, they're all coming from Service Worker, which is what it says here in the size. The fact that it's come from the Service Worker, of course, means it was in the cache and it didn't have to go to the internet to get those. So if I set the web page to offline, hit refresh, you see it still loads perfectly. You can see down here it's failing to download the Service Worker because every single time you reload the page it checks for an update, but apart from that everything is working just fine. Let's take a quick look at the code which we have down here. First of all, we're registering the service worker. So what we're doing is we're just listening to the page load event, and then when we do that, we're checking if the service worker is in the navigator. All that basically means is we're seeing if service worker is supported by this browser, because there's no point trying to call the service worker methods if it's not. Then we register the service worker and we either say we're good to go or we're not, and if we're not, we just print out the error. I don't really know why that would happen, it shouldn't do, but if that's the case, of course, we'll get the error there. In terms of the service worker, all we've got inside this install method is this self.skip waiting line. And what self.skip waiting does is it says, as soon as you've downloaded this service worker, just run it immediately. Because what Chrome does to try and prevent any conflicts with multiple versions is it will say that if you've installed a new service worker, but you've still got the web page open, it will wait to install that service worker until that page has been closed to make sure you don't have any conflicts. By saying self.skip waiting, we're saying just start this new service worker immediately, and that means that we're able to cache files faster and get that better progressive web app experience straight away rather than having to wait. The way we're actually caching URLs is by using the fetch event. It's literally an event listener for fetch. We basically check the cache for our request, If we've got it, then we just return that response, which is here. If we don't, then we fetch that request, but we do something special before we give it back to the browser. We open our cache, we put it in the cache, and then we return the response. Notice how we are cloning the response. The reason we're doing that is because the response is a stream which can only be read once. So we have to clone it because it needs to be read once by the browser to display on the page, and then once by the service worker so it can be added to the cache. So that's something you should watch out for. Another thing to note is that I've assumed that this application is always going to be the same, haven't added any support for updating it or for changing any of the scripts, so you'd need something where you're checking for the hashes of the URLs, and if anything is changed, you'll then rebuild the caches. Either way, this was all really easy to do. You don't have to change any settings on your host. As long as you're running on HTTPS, then you should be good to go. Alright, so that's the end of this quick little video on turning to-do MVC into a progressive web app. If we run the Lighthouse report once more, because of course that's what we were gauging how good we were doing on, you will see, fingers crossed, we actually get 100 out of 100, which is really impressive. That's pretty much everything, I think. I'll leave the site online so you can always go and check it out. Once again, PWA.oliverdunk.com. But that's everything, so thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you soon.